Welcome, everyone. I'm Casey Freed Jennings, and I am the director of the Girl Rising's U.S. Educator Program. And I have been with Girl Rising since the very, very beginning, since we first imagined the film, and long before we had a clue what Girl Rising would become, and certainly not that we would become this global nonprofit organization that we are, or that we would have this robust educator program, which we have. But we're really excited that that's what we became. And we're also excited to have you guys here with us today. The origins of this workshop are actually a little different to this professional development than we've done before, because this one actually emerged from our Girl Rising educator community itself. We started hearing from educators how they were using Girl Rising to engage their students with the SDGs and explore the SDGs with their students. And it's a little embarrassing to admit that we hadn't sort of thought of that already, but when we did, it was sort of a no-brainer, and it made so much sense to us. I'm really excited us, and so we decided to do this. But as I say, it was nice because it emerged from our community itself. And it made sense because Girl Rising really is a unique vehicle for exploring many of the SDGs. So that's why we're here, and in a couple of minutes, you are going to hear from two teachers who are going to take you through how they have chosen to use Girl Rising and why they chose to use Girl Rising to get to dive into the SDGs. So very quickly, for those of you who are new to Girl Rising, as I mentioned, we're a global nonprofit organization, and we create and use stories to change the way the world values girls and their education, and the way girls value themselves, which is no less important to us. And the Girl Rising educator programs exist because we've seen how the Girl Rising stories can be such a powerful resource for educators who want to inspire their students to see beyond their borders, both geographical and cultural, who want them to understand the issues of educational and gender equity, to develop empathy, and to recognize that they have a voice that deserves to be heard, that needs to be heard, that should be heard, and that they have agency, and that they can make change happen. And that is what the SDGs are also all about. So that's why it's such a perfect fit, or feels so to us. I'm going to stop here for just a moment. This is to ask you a question. It's not a test. We don't expect you to know the answer, but it sort of lays the groundwork for what Girl Rising is. So worldwide, and you can put your answers in the chat if you don't mind. Worldwide, how many girls do you estimate don't attend school? 1 million? 5 million, 30 million, 130 million. I see one answer at 130 million here. Anyone else? A bunch of 130 million. Okay, so we've got a rate 30 million, hoping it's not higher. We all would hope it's not higher. Another 30 million, 130 million. Yeah, well, it's sadly, it's that higher number. It is the 130 million. And it's getting worse, made worse by the pandemic. And we truly don't know exactly what the impact that's going to have. And the reasons, as some of you know, are many, and they're profound. Child marriage, the modern day slavery, gender violence, extreme poverty, and all this stuff that extreme poverty brings along with it, religious and cultural tradition, among lots of others. And while that can be deeply depressing, Girl Rising is really about the other side of it. Girl Rising is about what happens when girls are educated, and how the world becomes better, it becomes healthier, it becomes stabler, it becomes more prosperous for everyone, not just for girls. And Girl Rising is also about how we can all, especially young people, be empowered to make change. So these are the girls of Girl Rising, and some of you already know them. For others, these are the stories these are the girls whose stories we tell in Girl Rising, and they are stories of resilience, of persistence, of hope. And they are at the very heart, and are the very soul of our educational resources. And they're girls like Soka. Soka's an orphan who survived only by scavenging in a massive garbage dump in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, just to survive. And Suma was sold into bonded labor in Nepal when she was just 6 years old. She had a realization at some point that in fact what she was living was in slavery, but she was liberated, and she decided that she was going to help and fight for others just like her. And Wadley from Haiti is another one of the girls, and Wadley just doesn't give up. And for those, some of you already know that, and those of you who don't will get a chance to see her story in just a few minutes. So here we are, using Girl Rising to explore the SDGs. This is the meat of what we're going to do here today, and it's going to be brought to you by two of our teachers, or two teachers who I like possessively call our teachers. First, you'll hear from Ron Nober. He teaches tech and STEM and STEAM in Southampton, New Jersey. And Ron honestly blew us away when we first met him with the speed and the utter creativity with which he embraced Girl Rising. And then you'll meet Aristide Metaxas, who has become another of what, again, we possessively call our Girl Rising super teachers. And I am so glad that we found Aristide and Ron, and I am so glad that Aristide and Ron found us. And I think you'll see why. So Ron, I'll stop sharing my screen and it's over to you.
All right. So like Casey said, my name is Ron Nober. And when I began to learn about Girl Rising and the SDGs, both really touched me and resonated with me as an educator. I saw my students in the girls from the film, and I could see the empathy and ability for students to find their voice for change in both Girl Rising and the SDGs. Today's students are more aware of the problems and issues in the world around them than previous generations. We can, wonder why, whether it's social media or a 24/7 news cycle, but Girl Rising and the SDGs help open those conversations and show there not only are people working on solutions, but lots of young people like themselves working on solutions. Girl Rising allows our students to see themselves. The surroundings of the girls they view in the film may be a bit different. Their clothes may be a bit different. The people may look different, but they can relate to education and going to school. Girl Rising shows exceptionally strong and determined students willing to take a stand, and like the term coined by Zoe Weil from the Humane Institute for Education, to become a solutionary. I teach a unit on digital leadership as part of our 6th grade technology. And in this unit, we discuss the power students have to have their voice heard in the world. I discuss social media platforms that they're using can be tools for real change in their hands. I work with the students to see themselves not just as consumers of media content, but as creators with a voice to bring awareness to real world issues. And Girl Rising is an integral part of the culminating project. I used both Wadley, whose chapter we'll view in a second, and Suma, her chapter of Girl Rising, to engage the students in a final project that I call Using Social Media for Social Good. And to start that unit, we discuss what technology and social media, or that technology and social media, can and should be used for global good. So let's take a look at Wadley's chapter.
Here's the hard truth. In spite of the fact that educating a girl may be the highest return investment available in the developing world, millions of girls just aren't making it. Right now, there are 130 million girls between the ages of 6 and 17 out of school, and hundreds of millions more who struggle every day to simply remain where they belong, in a classroom.
The morning of January 12th, 2010, was bright and beautiful in a way that Wadley could not remember any other morning ever having been before. It was the dry season, when wildflowers bloomed, and flowers that bloomed on their own, without rain, fascinated some little girls. It made impossible things seem possible, unachievable things appear doable. And the flowers, the hibiscus, the azaleas, the bougainvilleas, they all looked even brighter when Wadley was happy.
Wadley, sonnerie, papa retard pour l'école.
That morning, Wadley was working to memorize Toussaint Louverture's final speech as he was removed from Haiti by the French after he tried to win independence for the country. Wadley liked to imagine herself defiant, like brave Toussaint Louverture. But she also wished she had been given some words by women to recite. Brave and strong women, like her mother.
Wadley, yourself, tu crucifix.
Every day, Wadley brought 2 snacks from her mother's tray, one for herself and one for another child. That day, she chose a new friend, Shelda, a girl whose father had been killed the week before. He was a taxi driver, and someone had gotten into his car with a gun and asked him to get out. He had refused, and the person had shot him. Soon the moment came for Wadley and her classmates to recite their quotes from the history lesson.
Alexandra.
Wadley watched as some of her friends recited or failed to recite. Their stammers, stutters, and hesitations seemed to her like a long poem, a love poem to history.
Wadley?
En me renversant, on a abattu à Saint-Domingue que le temps de la liberté de Noir poussera des racines parce qu'elles sont profondes et nombreuses.
That afternoon, all Wadley could think was it was the dry season when wildflowers bloomed. And these words seemed a perfect beginning for her composition and a fitting bookend to her day, for they seemed to emerge somehow out of the dream that she had been having that morning. Wadley could not remember how she and her mother got to the open field near the university. It was still the dry season, but wildflowers no longer bloomed. In the tent camp, she often heard the most dazed of the adults say, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust." This they said when they were finally resigned to the fact that their missing loved ones would never be coming back. Life tried to return to normal, except now her mother roamed the city during the day, looking for friends and family from whom to seek help. And instead of school, Wadley went to the water fountain with a bucket. Every day now, as she passed through the camp and the ruins of her neighborhood, she thought about school. Sometimes, as she walked by the rubble of the school itself, she thought she heard the voices of her friends reciting the lessons that she now missed so much.
Wadley.
L'école a ouvert.
On connaît. Cherchez de l'eau pour moi, s'il vous plaît, Wadley.
L'école ouvre, maman, l'école.
Parce que je n'ai pas l'argent.
Money was still not completely clear to Wadley. She knew that there was never enough of it, that some people had more of it than others, and that it determined in many cases how people looked at you and talked to you and treated you. It was the reason some people ate 3 meals every day, while others ate every couple of days. It was why, she was learning now, that some kids went to school and others did not.
Wadley, bye-bye, à plus tard.
Bye-bye, maman.
The next morning, Wadley decided that she would go to school and sit on the bench in front of Madame Roy along with the others. No matter that there was no money, that's what she would do.
Madame.
Bonjour les enfants, c'est vous.
Merci, madame.
Où l'école ici, hein?
For a moment, Wadley wondered how Madame Roy could not recognize her. But, remembered Wadley, the earthquake had twisted a lot of people's minds. Many people did not even recognize themselves anymore.
Oui, madame, c'est l'élève premier ici.
Moi, je connais Wadley. Mais en réalité, ça c'est nouveau l'école. Mon père moi l'école là déjà?
Non, pas de cob.
Moi, bien regrette ça. Mais obligé à la faire Wadley. Les hauts capés Wadley.
Wadley decided that even though money could do many things, it was also a curse, because only a cursed thing could keep her out of school. But she was not cursed. Hadn't she been hearing from her mother and the others in the tent camp that those who had survived the earthquake were blessed? Surely it meant that she was supposed to do something special. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, she thought to herself. The next morning, Wadley started for the tent school again. She wasn't sure what she was going to do, but she was determined to go and stay.
Est-ce que maman paye l'école là pour déjà, Wadley? Est-ce que maman paye l'école là pour déjà?
Non,
Est-ce que tu as déplacé la Wadley?
non,
Faut aller la ka ou Wadley?
non.
C'est la dernière fois que je dis ça.
A tout wap voye m'tourner, m'a toujours kap vini, jusqu'à pas m'arrêter.
Sorti là.
A tout wap voye m'tourner, m'a toujours kap vini, jusqu'à se m'arrêter.
And the flowers, the hibiscus, the azaleas, the bougainvilleas, they all looked even brighter when Wadley was happy. They even seemed to thrive from it.
Wadley's video was the first video that I saw when I started to watch Girl Rising or learn about Girl Rising, and it was her smile, I think, that made the connection for me to every student that I have in school and really drew me in. So the culminating project that I do with this digital leadership lesson is after we view chapters from Girl Rising, we discuss the connection between the SDGs and what the students saw in the film. Specifically, we talk about SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 4, quality education, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 10, reducing inequalities, and SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. Now, there are many more connections that can be made to the SDGs, but those are a few of the main ones that we focus on. So once we've done that and we've made the discussion, students then create media, either graphic media or videos, to support and bring awareness to the causes of gender equality, poverty, educational disparities, and girls' education. And what we do is we share those through social media on my Twitter and Instagram and through a website. And I'll just show you a little bit of the website. And this is our website, and there will be a link to that in some of the materials that we have in a Wakelet. And they create these graphics. These are some of the graphics they've created with Canva, all based around what they've learned through watching Girl Rising. Regular graphics, they create animated GIFs. And again, just wanted to show you some of what they've been able to do. This one, the animated GIF is probably one of my favorites that has been created so far. And then we have a few videos that they've created as well. We kind of curate some of the exemplars on this website. So once we've done the work with Girl Rising, we go from Girl Rising to personal passion projects. Through Girl Rising and the strength of Wadley and Suma finding their voice and working to become agents of change for themselves, their communities, and the world is a great transition to that part of the project. Students take that strength shown by Wadley and Suma and they find their own voice and work to become agents of change for something that speaks to them on a personal level. They focus on one or more of the SDGs related to a cause or a passion that they have, and then create media to bring awareness to that. And Girl Rising, what it does is it helps make that connection real and human. Before watching Girl Rising, the SDGs to the students may seem distant. seem like a series of numbers or colors. But our discussions around the SDGs as they relate to Wadley and Summa take those numbers and colors and create a more personal connection, and that human connection. Students can then more easily find and relate to an SDG or SDGs that they have their connection to. There really is an SDG to speak to and engage each student. You can see here, this is not the typical way you see the SDGs, but it has them broken down into different pillars, economic, environmental, and social. And while some of them can move very easily in between those pillars, this chart, I say should not be viewed as a static chart, but more fluid, because a lot of those SDGs can flow between those. Because, as I said at the beginning, a lot of our students are aware of global problems around them and aware of that there are adults working towards solutions, they themselves want to start to be part of the solutions, like they've seen Wadley and Summa, do. So here are some of the passions that some of my students use in their projects. And it's, clean water for communities, equitable access to education, work, healthcare, et cetera. Gender and racial equality. A big one in my school with some of the girls in my school is dress code and the gender disparities with dress code. And they don't feel like it targets the boys as much as the girls. So it's one that gets a lot of, a lot of volume when we start to discuss it. I'd love to see if you want to put into the chat, what are some issues that you might see some of your students focus on with those SDGs? Feel free to throw those into the chat, and maybe you can learn a little bit from each other as you see those as I continue on. So many times when educators start to hear about the SDGs, one of the things that I get asked is, I don't see them fitting into my curriculum, or it doesn't necessarily work for my subject area. And I really, try and sit with people and let them know the SDGs can fit into any subject area across curriculum. And here are just a few ideas I put together on the slides. If you're teaching math, statistics, geometry, fractions, percents, measurements, social studies, you're talking about geography, history of different, countries, population, laws, either global or local, language arts, literature studies, and, Aristi's going to talk much more about language arts, in science, environmental sciences, sustainable practices, different inventions, sustainable communities. PE is one that I've gotten a lot. And, you saw Wadley walking back and forth with water, right? To get clean water. A great simulation in a PE class, carrying buckets of water and letting students get a sense of what that must feel like. You can talk about healthy living and nutrition. Music, you see Summa in her chapter, music plays a big part in helping her deal with what she's going through in her life. And there's a lesson linked here for Sounds of Change, which is by Learning for Justice, and just talks about the connections between music and voice and change. And again, you can see art and technology. And if you have viewed any of the other chapters, both Roxana and Yasmin have amazing artwork in their stories that could be brought into an art class. And again, think about, if you wanted to put into the chat, again, what are some possibilities that you see? Where do you maybe see what you just maybe saw with Girl Rising and Wadley? Where could that fit into different subject areas? And now I want to share some of the examples of student passion projects related to the SDGs. Climate change is a big one for my students. And this is a student created video, a sixth grader, and her passion was drawing attention to climate change. And I did want to mention Girl Rising has a great lesson they've partnered with Take Action Global to create a lesson called Future Rising, Girls Education and Climate Change. And I believe Molly may throw that link into the chat, or it will at least be linked on the Wakelet that we have. So let's take a look at this video. And that was, again, one of the sixth graders that we have. And these are some of the other student passions in some of the graphics that they've created, passions of, talking about hunger and gender equality, racism. And some of them were so touched by what they had seen with Girl Rising when we started out this project that, education and educational equality was their passion and really, spoke to them and stuck with them. And here are just a few more examples. This one I love to point out because the one with the dirt bike rider is a young lady named Natalie, and Natalie is a high-level dirt bike racer, and she was very, very passionate and vocal about sharing her voice and how she has looked in a male-dominated sport and that she can ride with the best of any boy out there. She doesn't let them forget it in our school. So it was great to see her. And some of those pictures are actually her riding. And again, graphics created with Canva, and the videos that we've created were created with WeVideo. And then finally, I did want to mention, students in my class don't forget their voice when they leave sixth grade. We revisit Girl Rising and the strength, determination, and voice shared by Wadley and Suma in an eighth grade project that I do called Shoes for a Cause. And in this project, students are designing footwear prototypes that are designed to bring attention to SDGs. And this year, or in years past, the shoes are auctioned off at the end of the project to raise money for SDG related charities. And we have a website, which is shoesforacause.com. And I'm proud to say this year, Girl Rising will be one of the charities that the money raised is donated to. So, that's my part. And I would like to thank you all for the time. And I'm going to turn it over to Aristi.
Thank you, Ron. Hi, everyone. My name is Aristi Metaxas, and I teach IB English Language and Literature at a preparatory school in South Florida. My driving force really from my heart, inside and outside of the classroom as an educator, is to really expand the global possibilities for women's societal and cultural and educational equity. And I came to Girl Rising about 4 years ago. I've been teaching it since then. First, I'm teaching film and I'm teaching various subjects, but really it's a perfect resource for my students to really achieve their learning outcomes, to kind of explore the film as a nonfiction text type, develop meaningful connections with the girl stories and the global goals that they'll be researching in class. We look at a few non-informational text types, but this is at the beginning of the junior year, so it's really a quite powerful experience for them. So I think what I love most about the film is that it allows them to kind of experience and critically think and feel connected to something that might feel very above them and very complicated and nuanced, and that to bring in the girls' stories and their narratives, it allows them to have that experiential spark for more in-depth research that they're going to do, and to really understand quality education and gender equity from a real, one girl story, many girl stories, and then bring in their own stories to kind of make that linkage. So I feel like my students experience it to kind of like watch the girls, especially, Wadley, rise up, value their own stories as well, and to want to be the change that they seek, and to make connections and conversations in class. So that's kind of like the background as to how I teach it. I want you to look now at making connections. And while the learning profile traits that you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen are qualities that we use in the IB, they're really kind of attributes that all of us teachers, no matter what part of the world we're in today, we're wanting to foster and to kind of cultivate. We want our students to be creative and curious as they inquire. We want their knowledge to kind of make them think not only critically, but very reflectively and empathetically. And we really want to bridge some of those qualities and connect them to the goals. So I always start with this so that they're aware that their journey with the goals, with the SDG goals, will be really consolidating a lot of these skills. And so no matter what subject you're teaching or what part of the world you're teaching in today, these are real tangible learning outcomes for your subjects that each of the goals will allow and engage the students to develop and strengthen. And I love to come back to this at the end of the unit so that they can see, wow, the research I did on climate action, I really understand myself in a more knowledgeable way, and I'm really communicating myself better. And so we start with this before we even unpack, what are the SDGs. We then go to really kind of talking about how we're going to watch the full film. And so for me, I watched the full film. My students were juniors, and they know that eventually down the road, they could use this as part of their coursework, and they're going to be doing some project-based learning around it. So some of the opportunities that they have for Girl Rising are writing a poem around their feelings and their experiences around the watching of it, or making a song, or crafting a diary entry in the voice of. I use a lot of Harvard Project Zero thinking routines. I use something that we'll go into a little bit more in depth called Lenses for Dialogues, really to kind of allow for students to watch the film and feel that perspective taking is really important in how you unpack that and what stories shape identities, not just Wadley's or Suma's, but theirs, theirs in their own life. And then we move to the project-based learning. We use a lot of technology like Ron was looking at. We have students researching 3 goals that they want to interconnect and make connections with, and make some intersectional meaning for themselves as they learn about it and present it. And then as we move forward on the next slide, you'll see that they take this then into how can they become the change makers? How can they then use Girl Rising and the goals to kind of synthesize what they know and what they feel to make a difference in our world? So we start. What are these? What are these 17 mysterious goals that are all around my classroom when they come in as juniors? I cut all the little tiles up of the little goals in envelopes, and the first experience are students working to kind of sort them, connect them, map them, have conversations around what they think might be connected and what they're not quite sure about yet, and then presenting it to the class, kind of justifying their thinking. From there, we will go to the full watching of Girl Rising, and some of the questions that they're going to be looking at and thinking about while they're watching the film. I always say, put your laptop aside and just watch the film and really immerse yourself with it. That's to me what we're wanting, that emotive experience, but to be aware of how we'll ask them to kind of interact later. So what are the specific stories that resonate with you, and why? Why do you say that? Are you from one of the parts of the world and that really resonates for you? Do you recognize Wadley's strength and fiber within yourself? How does your own cultural and educational experience differ from the girls in the film? Profoundly, perhaps. Do you think your experience of the world is influenced by gender stereotypes? Not just on the macro level, on the global level, but in your own classroom and in your own world. And in what ways is meaning constructed, negotiated, expressed, and discovered? So they're really thinking about these questions while we watch it. How does that film, or how does the film, add authentic voices to understanding the goals, especially quality education and gender equality? And how has this impacted you? Even months later, it'll percolate. And how might this film inspire you to think globally, to act globally, and to act locally? So right after the film, we will do something called Lenses for Dialogues, and students will work in small pairs. And I encourage you to not be afraid to do this with any grade level or any subject. Really, there's a window in for any student. And how I approach it is to say, you know, think about what you just felt and experienced with Girl Rising. What lens do you want to view it through? On your Post-it note, you could be relating it to the kind of school you go to, public or private, part of the world, your role in your family, your race, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexuality. In essence, with your group, you know, write down on your Post-it notes how you see the film and what it makes you feel, and then we'll share it as a whole class. Really, I think quite profound these days, now that we're post-COVID and we're in class together, that students are reevaluating their own lives and what matters to them, and how the world defines their world and how they define the world in such profound ways. And so I found that both boys and girls connect to Girl Rising. And I want to say that year in and year out, I find that, and it's quite affirmational. So my young student on the left, boy, this was his lens. Men can be feminists and have some responsibility for helping girls using our own privilege. Men can be activists and prevent harm. This can be related to the story in Ethiopia where the brother says no and stands up for his sister when she is set to be in an arranged marriage. Creating equity requires being an upstander, not just a bystander when you are not directly affected. And that was a really profound, longer conversation that we had around what that means to have privilege and how you can then use that for, you know, the wider community. It was really, you know, quite beautiful actually to see students feeling safe to do that. And then again, we take it a bit further. We'll keep journals, what we call learning profiles around gender equality and quality education. I might say, since I'm a literature teacher here, I know that they're going to be making connections with Girl Rising and the SDGs and the literature that we study. And I know that I've already chosen literature that will tie into kind of themes that are relevant here. So in this instance, one girl, who I did not know she was a poet, felt this way. She said, "I have been dealt the cards of luck. For in my hands, I hold a powerful weapon. I set forward a blaze, those around me awestruck, for my knowledge makes me strong. Many have tried to hold me back. They do not want me to be free. Against me, they will attack, but I will always stand tall. A girl with a book, yes, that is me. And with many books, I will soon set other girls free." And she went on to write more. This student is actually putting together an onzine now that deals with extended issues on gender equity. So as you can see, there's lots of creative ways for students to kind of come from it and take something away. The next step in our unit is to really kind of look at how we can now become meaningful change makers and what kinds of projects we might want to do. And we come back to Wadley's story again that you just saw. And I asked my students using Canva, how has Girl Rising, specifically Wadley's story, helped you make connections personally with women's equity, gender equality, quality education? And how then do you want to maybe make a connection and a difference in the community? You know, what's your circle of action? What's your next step? So they were asked to do either animated GIFs, short videos, posters, memes. And I'm going to show you the next slide is Sarah's. Take away. You know what I love about what she said about empathy, I know that Girl Rising has a whole unit at PD that they did on SEL and social and emotional learning. And I know many of us as educators around the world are embedding that more, you know, more intentionally into our unit. And that was lovely that was what her takeaway was, that it you know, that the immersive film really helped her to do that. And so that was lovely. And then from there, they take a longer approach to the SDGs. Which 3 goals now do they want to really, as a group, research, understand? How do they want to define those goals independently and teach the class eventually? How do they want to explore these issues intersectionally? And what are the compounds and the complications around of these issues and these sustainability goals? Which organizations are working towards this, both nonprofit and in partnerships for the goals? And how can they, in the end, eventually, they and their students really use this knowledge to make a difference, to think globally and to act locally? So this is one group's website. They spent about 2-3 weeks really working hard on this and then presenting it to class, and I videotaped them. And we're building through the junior year to get them to where they end up deciding, do they want to use Girl Rising and one of the pieces of literature to really analyze the power that these two have together. So that's where we go with it. And then finally, we're at kind of this place right now. There's a wider global goals project called TeachSDG, where schools globally, you might be familiar with it, are using their classes to really explore the goals, to find out what matters to them, and to find ways to be change makers and create their own projects. And so that we're kind of at the cusp of that right now. And this is one group, they're actively promoting this right now on Twitter. They've got a QR code that takes you to a website, and they're putting together a project to educate, and it's all about re-educating. And you can see a little bit of their animated GIF there. Their website's amazing. It is in the Wakelet, so I encourage you, if you want to go and take a look at it, they'd be really happy to know that people are looking at it. And then finally, I just kind of wanted to come back to where I started. I found Girl Rising and they found me. And I feel like those magical connections, when you find something that not just resonates for you in the classroom, that's beautiful. That's why you're all here. It resonates in terms of the SDGs, but really as a person, as a human being, as a woman, as a citizen, I feel like my work matters. And I feel like the students that come back to me year in and year out, they're continuing to write me about how they're wanting to do more on campus, and they are, they are the SD generation. So I'm proud to share this, and hopefully you found some ways to apply it to your classes and find new creative ways that we can all support each other in making these goals come alive for students. Thank you.
Again, thank you all. Have a good evening or good morning for some of you. And thank all of you overseas who joined us despite the ridiculous hour over there. So we really truly appreciate it, and it makes for a better session for all of us.